They say the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. I learned that at 2:47 a.m. when I found proof my brother had sold my dead mother's legacy for $850,000. Her dying words were, "Protect the recipes, Victoria." His plan was to steal them. But here's what he didn't know. I found out first, and I didn't get angry. I got surgical. What I did next made him lose everything, destroyed a celebrity chef's empire, and turned me into someone my mother wouldn't recognize. Subscribe now. You won't believe what comes next. Subscribed? You're amazing. Thank you. Now let me tell you about the night that changed everything. They say you never truly know someone until money's involved. I'd add one more condition: until you're not looking. My brother Marcus taught me that lesson at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, when I opened his laptop searching for our shared grocery list and found a folder labeled Project Phoenix. Inside were 247 photographs, every single page of our mother's recipe journal, the one she'd handwritten in Cantonese and English over 40 years, the one she'd left to me with trembling hands 3 days before the cancer took her. The same journal Marcus had held at her funeral 8 months ago, crying about preserving Mom's legacy. Turns out he meant it literally. He was preserving it all right. Preserving it as a $850,000 commodity for Apex Restaurant Group, San Francisco's most predatory culinary empire, owned by the one chef in this city I'd publicly called a sellout with a Michelin star and a soul made of market research. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even close the laptop. I just sat there in my own kitchen. Well, technically it was still my apartment, though Marcus and his wife Bryn had been temporarily staying here since Mom died, and felt something inside me calcify. You know that moment in movies when the protagonist's eyes go dead and you know someone's about to get destroyed? I felt that happening to my face. My hands were steady as I scrolled through the email thread between Bryn and David Park, Apex's CEO. "She'll never know," Bryn had written. "By the time Lunar figures it out, we'll be in Maui with the money. Marcus feels guilty, but I reminded him, Victoria chose her restaurant over having a real family. She doesn't need this like we do." The reply from David Park was timestamped, 11:34 p.m. "Your husband is giving me the ammunition to finally put that pretentious little establishment out of business. Chen family recipes belong in an empire, not gathering dust in some boutique operation. Tell Marcus the contract closes in 30 days. And Bryn, good to be working with you again." I closed the laptop, walked to my bedroom, locked the door, and then, only then, did I allow myself to vomit into the wastebasket beside my bed. My mother's recipes, the ones she'd taught me to make at 6 years old, standing on a step stool in our cramped Sunset District kitchen, her Cantonese instructions punctuated with, "No, no, Victoria, gentle hands. You treat the dough like you treat family, with respect." The recipes she'd refused to write down for years because Eat Real cooking lives in the hands, not on paper, until the diagnosis came and she'd spent her final months frantically documenting everything. Terrified her legacy would die with her. She'd left the journal to me, not Marcus, and we both knew why. I was the one who'd spent 20 years in kitchens. I was the one who'd transformed our family's struggling dim sum diner into Lunar, the Michelin-starred restaurant that food critics called a love letter to Cantonese home cooking elevated to art. Marcus was the one who'd burned ramen in college and thought MSG was a vegetable. But here's what twisted the knife deeper than the betrayal itself. Marcus was Mom's favorite. Always had been. The baby boy, the charming one, the one she'd light up for when he'd breeze into family dinners 2 hours late with some half-baked business idea and a smile that made her forgive everything. I was the responsible one, the one who paid her medical bills, the one who held her hand through chemo while Marcus was in Tahoe, clearing his head. And even then, even as she was dying, she'd whisper to me in Cantonese, "Take care of your brother, Victoria. He needs you. You're strong. You'll always be fine." Filial piety, the gift that keeps on bleeding. I'd spent 40 years being strong for everyone else, and apparently, that made me an acceptable casualty. Marcus had learned from the best. Mom had trained him to take, and trained me to give. I'd just never imagined he'd take the one thing that was supposed to be sacred. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did what any chef does when the world is ending. I made a list. Not a revenge list, Not yet. A verification list. Because there was a possibility, however microscopic, that I'd misunderstood. Maybe the photos were for a family cookbook project. Maybe the Apex emails were fake, some kind of phishing scam. Maybe I was losing my mind from grief and overwork, seeing betrayal where there was only… what? Innocent photography of a priceless family heirloom. Even as I wrote these alternative explanations in my phone's notes app, I knew I was lying to myself. The sick feeling in my stomach wasn't confusion. It was recognition. All those times Marcus had asked to borrow the journal, just to feel close to Mom. All those evenings when Bryn would find excuses to be in the apartment alone while I was at the restaurant. The way Marcus had suddenly started asking detailed questions about Lunar's finances, our supplier relationships, how I'd structured the business. I'd thought he was finally taking an interest in the family trade. Turns out he was doing due diligence for a corporate raid. At 6 a.m., I got up, showered, and put on the same chef's whites I'd worn for 1,000 services. I braided my hair with the same efficient movements I'd learned from my mother. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw her eyes staring back. Dark, unreadable, carrying decades of immigrant survival instinct. My grandmother had fled Hong Kong with nothing but 3 pieces of jade jewelry and a memory of her mother's cooking. My mother had built a life in a country that mispronounced her name for 40 years. And I had taken their legacy and made it matter in a city that worships innovation, but rarely respects tradition. 3 generations of Chen women, each one tougher than the last, each one teaching the next how to survive men who underestimated them. Mom used to say, "In China, the women hold up half the sky. In America, we hold up the whole damn roof and let the men think they built it." I'd laughed when she said it. I wasn't laughing now. I made coffee, Ethiopian single origin, because even in crisis, I'm pretentious about my beans, and sat at the kitchen counter, directly across from where Marcus's laptop still sat, closed and innocent looking. I heard the shower turn on in the guest bathroom. Bryn, getting ready for whatever bullshit brand strategy consultation she was pretending to work on this week. Then Marcus's door opened, and my little brother shuffled out in his worn-out Cal Berkeley sweatshirt, hair sticking up, looking like the perpetual college student he'd always been. "Morning, Vic," he said, yawning. "You're up early. Restaurant stuff." I smiled at him. It felt like arranging my face into a position it didn't want to hold. "Always restaurant stuff," I said. "You know me. Married to the job." He poured himself coffee, my expensive coffee, in my apartment while plotting to rob my legacy, and gave me that sheepish little brother grin that used to make me forgive him for anything. "You work too hard," he said. "Mom always worried you'd burn out, you know? That you'd spend your whole life cooking and forget to, actually live." I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted like ash. "Yeah," I said softly. "Mom worried about me a lot. Good thing she had you, the one who knew how to live." The irony detonated silently between us, visible only to me. He had no idea. No idea that I'd seen everything, that I knew exactly how he planned to live, on the corpse of our mother's memory, on the ruins of my life's work, on $850,000 earned by selling what was never his to sell. He sipped his coffee, oblivious, already thinking about his day, about his plan, about his future in Maui while my restaurant burned. And I sat there, across from him, my face a perfect mask of sisterly affection, and thought, "You have no idea what's coming, but you will. Oh, Marcus, you really, really will." I gave myself 3 days to be absolutely certain before I became the kind of person who destroys her own brother. 3 days of testing, watching, documenting. 3 days of being a detective in my own life while pretending to be the same exhausted, grief-distracted Victoria everyone expected. Day 1. I casually mentioned at breakfast that I was thinking of finally digitizing Mom's journal, maybe making it more accessible for the family. I watched Marcus's fork freeze halfway to his mouth, watched Bryn's eyes flick to him with laser precision. That's a great idea," Marcus said, too quickly, too enthusiastically. "Really honor her legacy, you know? When were you thinking of doing that? Not can I help, or what a lovely tribute. No, because he needed to know if his timeline was blown." I shrugged, stirring my congee with deliberate casualness. Oh, not for a while. Too busy with the restaurant. Why, did you want to be involved? The relief on his face was a confession. No, I just think it's cool. You should totally do that. Eventually. Day 2. I committed a crime. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not apologizing either. While Marcus was out at some networking meeting, Bao and Bryn was at yoga, I installed monitoring software on his laptop, the kind that logs keystrokes, takes screenshots, records every digital breath. Illegal. Probably. Did I give a single fuck? Not even a little. Within 6 hours, I had everything. Calendar invites with Apex's legal team. Encrypted messages with David Park about securing the Chen IP before she suspects anything. A contract draft that made my blood pressure spike so hard I had to sit down. Consultant agrees to provide complete and exclusive access to Chen family culinary intellectual property, including but not limited to recipes, techniques, and methodologies developed by Huiying Chen, deceased. Payment, $850,000 USD, upon successful verification and implementation. There it was. Verification and implementation. They weren't just stealing recipes. They were going to use them to launch a competitor, probably called some bullshit like Dynasty, or Heritage, or whatever focus grouped name tested well with white people who think Panda Express is authentic. But the email that really did it, the one that turned my grief into something cold and surgical, was from Marcus to Bryn, sent at 1:43 a.m. 6 days ago. I feel like shit about this, but you're right. Vic chose this life. She chose the restaurant over everything, over dating, over kids, over actually being part of the family except when we needed money. Mom left her the journal because Vic's the chef, but Mom would have wanted all her children to benefit. Besides, Vic will be fine. She always is. Being strong is literally her entire personality. We need this money. Our baby needs this money. She'll never even know it was us. I read that email 17 times, memorized every word. Let each sentence carve itself into my memory like a brand. He'd convinced himself this was wealth redistribution, that my childlessness made me less deserving, that strength was a personality trait instead of a survival mechanism forced on the eldest daughter of immigrants who couldn't afford weakness. Day 3. I had coffee with Aiden Liu, my sous chef and the closest thing I had to a best friend. We'd worked together for 8 years. He'd followed me from my first-line cook job at Boulevard, had been there for every step of Lunar's evolution from scrappy pop-up to Michelin darling. Aiden was 32, whip-smart, openly gay in a way I envied. He'd come out at 19. I'd never even had time to figure out who I was outside the kitchen, and possessed the rare quality of actually telling me the truth instead of what I wanted to hear. We met at Ritual Coffee on Valencia, and I must have looked like death because his first words were, "Okay, who died and what do you need me to help bury?" I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I told him everything. Showed him the emails on my phone, watched his face cycle through disbelief, rage, and something that looked like genuine fear. "Victoria," he said slowly, setting down his cortado, "you need to call a lawyer. Today. Right now. This is intellectual property theft. You could destroy them legally, and—" "I don't want legal," I interrupted. My voice came out flat, affectless. "Legal takes years. Legal costs money I'd rather spend on Lunar. Legal might not even work. Recipe copyright is murky as hell." Aiden stared at me. "Then what do you want?" I looked out the window at the Mission District chaos. Tech bros in Patagonia vests, houseless folks with shopping carts, street art screaming revolution on every wall. San Francisco. The city that killed my mother with stress and inequality and medical bankruptcy. The city I'd somehow conquered by cooking her food. I want them to suffer exactly as much as they made me suffer, I said quietly. I want them to feel what it's like to lose everything while everyone watches. I want Marcus to understand that strength isn't a personality trait. It's what's left after people like him take everything else. Aiden was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You're talking about revenge." I met his eyes. "I'm talking about justice." He sighed, long and heavy. "There's a difference, Victoria." "Is there?" I challenged. They're stealing my mother's legacy for a payday. They're going to give David Park, the same asshole who called my restaurant quaint, ethnic comfort food, the ammunition to destroy me. They're doing it while living in my home, eating my food, pretending to grieve with me. Tell me, Aiden, what's the legal remedy for that kind of betrayal? He didn't have an answer. Nobody would. That night, back at the apartment, I did something that felt both insane and perfectly logical. I made myself dinner from the journal. Mom's Hong Shao Roo, red braised pork belly, the recipe she'd perfected over 30 years, the one that had originally put our family restaurant on the map before gentrification killed it. I followed her instructions exactly, written in her spidery handwriting with English translations in my teenage hand. Blanch pork, 5 minutes, cold water shock, heat wok, smoking hot, caramelize sugar until mahogany, careful, burns fast like gossip. Add pork, sear all sides, Shaoxing wine, whole star anise, cinnamon stick, dried chilies, soy sauce, Pearl River brand only, others too salty like American intentions. Simmer 90 minutes. Patience. You cannot rush wisdom. As I cooked, I cried for the first time since finding the emails. Not pretty tears. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body while I stirred the pot. Because this was it. This was the last time I'd cook from this journal with an innocent heart. What I was about to do would poison these recipes forever. Every dish would taste like revenge. Every technique would remind me of betrayal. Marcus had stolen my mother's legacy, but my plan would make me complicit in its corruption. The pork was perfect, meltingly tender, glossy with sauce, fragrant enough to make me understand why my grandmother had taught this recipe to my mother, who'd taught it to me. 3 generations of women, passing down not just food but survival, identity, love in its most tangible form. And Marcus had photographed it like it was content for Instagram, reduced it to data for a corporate transaction. I plated the pork over rice, ate it slowly, methodically, tasting every layer of flavor. The caramel, the spice, the fattiness cut by vinegar, the complexity that came from patience and respect for ingredients. This was why I cooked. Not for Michelin stars or James Beard nominations or lines around the block. I cooked because it was the language my mother and I had shared when English failed us both, when the demands of immigrant life made us too tired for words, and Marcus was going to sell that language to the highest bidder. I finished eating, washed my bowl with the same care Mom had taught me. Respect your tools, respect your ingredients, respect yourself. Then I pulled out my phone and ordered 3 things. Vintage paper stock from a specialty stationery shop in Berkeley, archival quality leather notebook, identical to Mom's journal, and a calligraphy pen set with ink that matched the fading brownish black of Mom's 40-year-old writing. 2-day shipping, $347.82 total. The price of revenge was surprisingly reasonable. Aiden called while I was checking out. "I can't support this," he said without preamble. "Whatever you're planning, I can't be part of it." I expected that. Aiden was good in a way I couldn't afford to be anymore. "I'm not asking you to be part of it," I said. "I'm just asking you not to stop me." Silence. Then, "Victoria, you're the best chef I've ever worked with. You're also the most stubborn person I've ever met, so I know I can't stop you." He paused. "But when this is over, and you're standing in the wreckage of your family, don't say nobody warned you that some things can't be uncooked." He hung up. I sat there in my kitchen, surrounded by my mother's ghost and my brother's betrayal, and thought, he's probably right. But I stopped caring about right and wrong the moment Marcus chose $850,000 over our mother's memory. Forging my dead mother's handwriting turned out to be easier than forging forgiveness. I spent 2 weeks in the test kitchen after hours, door locked, security cameras temporarily malfunctioning. Thank you, Aiden, for that ethical compromise. Practicing Huiying Chen's script until my hand cramped. Her characters had a specific rhythm, the Cantonese written with confident, swift strokes from years of writing grocery lists and letters to relatives in Hong Kong. The English more hesitant, formed with the careful precision of someone who'd learned the language at 35 and never quite trusted it. I practiced on scratch paper first. Hundreds of sheets covered with soy sauce, ginger, patience, until I could replicate the slight rightward slant, the way her G's looped lower than standard, the inconsistent pressure that came from arthritis in her final years. When I finally wrote in the vintage journal I'd bought, it looked so much like her writing that I had a moment of pure dissociation. as if she were somehow possessing my hand from beyond death. The recipes themselves required surgical precision. They couldn't be obviously wrong. Marcus and Apex would test them before finalizing the deal. They had to work in small batches, the kind Marcus might make to verify authenticity. They'd only reveal their catastrophic flaws when scaled up to restaurant capacity, after significant investment, after public announcement, after the point of no return. So I became a saboteur of my own heritage, taking 40 years of accumulated knowledge and weaponizing it. Mom's famous char siu, the BBQ pork that had people lining up around the block at our old restaurant. I kept the marinade ratio identical but changed the oven temperature from 375 degrees to 425 degrees and reduced cook time by 15 minutes. In a home oven making 2 pounds, perfectly fine, nice caramelization. In a commercial kitchen making 50 pounds, burnt exterior, raw interior, complete disaster. The Xiao Long Bao, those delicate soup dumplings that were Lunar's signature, I altered the gelatin ratio in the soup filling by just 15%, enough that they'd still hold in small batch testing, but would explode violently during steaming in restaurant volume, creating a kitchen nightmare. The Mapo tofu recipe was my cruelest edit. I switched the type of Sichuan peppercorn from Honghua, red flour, to Qinghua, green flour, a substitution that seems reasonable since both are called Sichuan peppercorn in English. But Honghua has a floral, citrusy, numbing quality that makes the dish sing. Qinghua has a harsher, almost medicinal numbing that, in the quantities Mom's recipe called for, would make people's mouths feel like they'd been to the dentist. And the Dan Dan noodles, Mom's recipe was already vinegar forward, a Sichuan Cantonese hybrid she'd developed. I tripled the black vinegar from 2 tablespoons to 6, in a single bowl for testing. Tangy, maybe a little sharp, but acceptable. In a restaurant serving 200 bowls on opening night. Absolutely inedible. Like drinking salad dressing spiked with battery acid. Every recipe was a time bomb. Every dish was a landmine. I was creating a culinary Trojan horse. And the sick thing was how good I felt doing it. But here's what I didn't anticipate. The emotional cost of corrupting the thing I loved most. Every fake recipe I wrote felt like I was killing my mother again. That sounds melodramatic, but I don't know how else to explain it. These dishes were her life's work, her immigrant triumph, her proof that she'd mattered in a country that had spent decades making her feel invisible. And I was deliberately ruining them, even if only on paper, even if for justified revenge. There were nights I'd go home after forging sessions and sit in the shower fully clothed, letting the water run until it went cold, trying to wash off the feeling that I was becoming someone my mother wouldn't recognize. Aiden found me like that once. He'd come by to drop off vendor invoices and used his key when I didn't answer. He didn't say anything, just turned off the water, handed me a towel, and sat on the bathroom floor while I shivered and tried to explain the unexplainable. "I'm destroying the thing I'm trying to save," I finally said. He just nodded. "I scorched earth," he said quietly. "You're so angry that you'd rather burn it all down than let them have it. Is that wrong?" I asked. He looked at me with something that might have been pity. "I don't know, Victoria, but I know you'll never be able to unthink what you're thinking right now." Mid-forgery, I had my first real crisis. I was working on Mom's Hong Shao Rao, the red braised pork I'd made the night I decided on revenge, and my hand froze over the page. This recipe was perfect. It didn't need to be changed. It was the dish that had made my grandmother a neighborhood legend in Kowloon. The dish my mother had cooked every Lunar New Year. The dish I'd served to the Michelin inspector who'd given us our star. And I was about to sabotage it by suggesting the wrong cut of pork, shoulder instead of belly, and omitting the crucial step of blanching. The fake version would be tough, greasy, and one-dimensional. I sat there for 20 minutes, pen hovering, thinking about what Aiden had said about things that can't be uncooked. If I wrote this corrupted version, I couldn't take it back. Marcus would steal it. Apex would make it. Food critics would taste it. And they'd think this diminished, damaged version, was Hui Ying Chen's Hong Shao Ru. My mother's legacy would be this lie. I almost quit. Almost grabbed my phone to call Marcus and confront him like a normal person, to appeal to whatever decency might still exist under his desperation and greed. Then I remembered the email. Vic will be fine. She always is. Being strong is literally her entire personality. and I finished writing the fake recipe with a steady hand. The crisis passed. The doubt evaporated. Because Marcus had made a critical miscalculation. He'd assumed my strength was infinite, a renewable resource he could exploit forever. He'd never considered that strength, when betrayed, doesn't dissipate. It crystallizes into something harder and infinitely more dangerous. I finished the journal in 17 days. 247 recipes, each one a perfect replica of my mother's handwriting, each one containing a subtle flaw that would only reveal itself under the bright lights and high pressure of restaurant service. I aged the pages with tea, creased the spine, even added a few accidental sauce stains in the same places the original had them. It was a masterpiece of deception. When I placed it on the kitchen counter where the original had always lived, and hid the real journal in the climate-controlled safe at Lunar, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. A sense of control. They were still going to betray me, but now I was orchestrating the consequences. The waiting was its own torture. I'd created the weapon. Now I had to watch Marcus load it and aim it at himself. I started acting differently around the apartment, more distracted, more emotionally distant, spending even longer hours at the restaurant. I needed them to think I was too absorbed in work to notice anything suspicious, too grief-stricken to be vigilant. It wasn't hard to fake. Grief was my constant companion anyway, only now it was mixed with anticipatory satisfaction. I'd catch Marcus looking at the journal on the counter, and I could see the calculation in his eyes. Was this a safe time to photograph more pages? Had I noticed anything? I started creating opportunities, leaving the apartment for predictable periods, mentioning errands I had to run. Every time I came back, the journal would be slightly displaced, 3 inches to the left, or turned at a different angle. They were taking the bait, photographing my carefully crafted lies, building their case for authenticity with evidence I'd manufactured. It was working, and part of me was horrified by how good I was at this. Aiden noticed the change in me. "Ah, you're different," he said one night after service, when the kitchen was cleaned and the staff had gone home. We were doing what we always did, sharing a bottle of wine. Tonight was a Sancerre from the Loire Valley because I'm pretentious even in crisis, and talking through the next day's specials. Except I wasn't really there. My mind was in the apartment, imagining Marcus and Bryn downloading files, writing emails to David Park, celebrating their imminent payday. Different how? I asked, though I knew. Colder, Aiden said bluntly. He never sugarcoated, which was why I valued him. Like you've already decided everyone's guilty, and you're just waiting to execute the sentence. I drank my wine. It tasted like river stones and green apples and the terroir of a place I'd never been. Maybe I have, I said. Aiden leaned back, studying me. The Victoria I met 8 years ago cried when we had to fire a dishwasher for stealing. Now you're orchestrating the complete destruction of your brother and you're... What? Calm. That doesn't worry you. I met his eyes. The Victoria you met 8 years ago had a mother, had a family, had reasons to be soft. That person is dead, Aiden. Marcus killed her when he turned my mother's legacy into a transaction. Aiden was quiet for a long time. Finally, I hope revenge tastes better than this wine, because you're paying for it with pieces of yourself you won't get back. But they stole the fake journal on a Tuesday, exactly 23 days after I'd finished creating it. I know because I'd installed a motion-activated camera in the kitchen, tiny thing the size of a button, tucked into the decorative molding, and it captured everything. I watched the footage that night at Lunar, alone in my office with the lights off. Bryn entering at 2:17 p.m., checking her phone, probably texting Marcus to confirm I was at a vendor meeting across town, then approaching the journal with the reverence of a heist movie. She didn't just photograph it this time, she took it, slipped it into her oversized Kuyana tote bag, the one I'd bought her for her birthday last year, because I was the kind of idiot who kept trying to build bridges to people actively burning them. She paused at the door, hand on the knob, and for one moment, I thought she might feel guilty. Instead, she smiled, a small, satisfied smile. Then she left with my mother's supposed legacy, my actual revenge, and no idea she was carrying her own destruction. I didn't confront them, didn't change my routine at all. That night, I came home to find Marcus and Bryn in the living room, watching Netflix, looking aggressively casual. "Hey, Vic," Marcus said, too bright, too performative. How was your day? I shrugged out of my jacket. Long vendor meeting ran over. Then we had a private event. Some tech CEO's birthday. 40 people. 9 courses. The usual circus. I looked around with feigned confusion. Hey, have you guys seen Mom's journal? I could have sworn I left it on the counter. The pause before Marcus answered was 3 seconds too long. No, haven't seen it. Maybe you moved it to your room. I frowned, playing my part. Maybe. God, I'm losing my mind. Too much on my plate. Bryn jumped in, voice syrupy with false concern. You're working yourself to death, Victoria. Maybe you should take a break, go somewhere, reset. Marcus and I could even stay here, keep an eye on things. The audacity was almost impressive. They'd stolen the journal, and were now suggesting I leave town so they could finalize their deal undisturbed. Maybe, I said noncommittally. After this quarter, too much happening at Lunar right now. What was happening at Lunar, beyond their knowledge, was preparation. I'd hired an intellectual property attorney named Patricia Mendoza, 58 Shark and Armani, the kind of lawyer who'd made her career destroying tech bros in depositions. I didn't tell her about the fake journal. I just established copyright for the real recipes, documented their provenance, and created a legal paper trail proving my exclusive ownership of all culinary intellectual property derived from Huiying Chen. I also hired a private investigator, which felt melodramatic until I realized how much I didn't know. Turned out Marcus's financial situation was worse than I'd thought. $340,000 in debt from a crypto investment that tanked, maxed out credit cards, a car lease he was 3 months behind on. Bryn was 4 months pregnant. That part gutted me, learning it from a PI report instead of from her. And her family had indeed cut her off after she'd married Marcus. They weren't just greedy. They were desperate. And desperation makes people rationalize anything. The investigator also uncovered something that made my blood turn to ice. David Park had a history of this. Not recipe theft specifically, but predatory acquisition of ethnic, culinary IP. He'd built Apex by identifying struggling family restaurants, befriending the owners, gaining their trust, and then launching competitor concepts that put the originals out of business. There was a Filipino family in Daly City, whose grandmother's adobo recipe now anchored Park's Manila Modern Restaurant. The family's original place closed within a year. A Mexican abuela in the Mission, whose tamale technique was now Park's Provisions. She'd died broke while he made millions. He was a culinary colonizer, and I'd almost been too devastated by familial betrayal to see the larger pattern. Marcus and Bryn weren't masterminds. They were desperate people who'd been weaponized by someone who did this professionally. That should have made me feel sympathy. It didn't. It made me angrier, because they'd chosen to sell me out to the one person in San Francisco who represented everything I hated about this industry's extraction of immigrant culture for profit. 3 days after the journal disappeared, Marcus announced they were taking a trip to LA for a few days. I knew what that meant. Finalizing the contract with Apex, getting the money wired, probably consulting with lawyers about how to structure the payment to minimize taxes. The night before they left, we had dinner together, my suggestion, which surprised them. I cooked, of course. Made Mom's drunken chicken, a Shanghainese dish she'd learned from a neighbor and adapted with Cantonese flavors. The real recipe, not the fake one. It was tender, fragrant, complex, everything her cooking had been. We ate in near silence, just the sound of chopsticks on bowls, and I watched my brother taste my mother's food and felt nothing but cold clarity. "This is amazing, Vic," he said, and sounded like he meant it. "You're so talented." "Mom was talented," I corrected. "I just follow her instructions." Bryn shifted uncomfortably. She knew. She had to know that I knew, on some subconscious level. Humans have instincts about these things. But greed is a powerful anesthetic. That night, after they'd gone to bed, I sat in the kitchen and thought about the version of this story where I was merciful, where I confronted Marcus in the morning, showed him the evidence, gave him a chance to back out, where I prioritized family over pride, forgiveness over justice. I tried to imagine what my mother would want me to do. But here's the thing about dead parents. You can make them say anything. I could imagine her saying, "Family is everything, Victoria. You have to forgive." I could just as easily imagine her saying, "I didn't flee communist China and scrub restaurant floors for 40 years, so your brother could sell my legacy to some Silicon Valley parasite. The dead don't give advice. They just leave holes, and we fill them with whatever we need to justify who we're becoming. I needed to believe Mom would want this, so I did. Maybe that makes me a bad daughter, but Marcus made me a bad sister first, and someone had to lose. They left for LA at 9 a.m. I watched from Lunar's office window as they loaded luggage into their Tesla, leased, according to the PI, 3 payments behind. Bryn was wearing the Vince cashmere sweater I'd given her for Christmas. Marcus had the Toomey backpack I'd bought him when his last business failed. They dressed themselves in my generosity to go sell my inheritance. The symbolism was so heavy-handed it would have been rejected in a screenwriting workshop, but life doesn't care about subtlety. I waited until their car disappeared around the corner. Then I called Patricia Mendoza. "It's happening," I said. They took the bait. Her voice was crisp, professional. "You're sure you want to proceed? Once we go public, there's no walking this back." I thought about Aiden's warning, about things that can't be uncooked, about the version of me that would exist after this, the one who'd chosen revenge over redemption. "I'm sure," I said, and the part of me that might have hesitated had died somewhere between "she'll be fine" and "she's literally just a restaurant." Patricia's plan was elegant. We'd wait for Apex to announce the new restaurant, let them invest capital, hire staff, do press, build anticipation. Then, right before opening, I'd go nuclear, post the evidence of theft, prove copyright ownership, and demonstrate that the recipes they'd stolen were fakes. Maximum damage, maximum embarrassment, maximum legal liability. "But there's a risk," Patricia warned. "If Marcus claims you gave him permission, or that the recipes were family property, this gets messy. Families are complicated in IP law." I smiled, and it felt like my face was cracking. "I have emails proving he knew he was stealing. I have photos of the theft. And I have the fake recipes, physical evidence that I knew about the theft and deliberately set a trap. No family complication, just fraud." Patricia was quiet. Then, "You're either the smartest client I've ever had, or the most vindictive. Can I be both?" I asked. She actually laughed. "Remind me never to piss you off." Apex announced Dynasty on a Thursday morning with the kind of media blitz that only venture capital can buy. Billboards on the 101. Instagram ads flooding every San Francisco foodie's feed. A press release that made my teeth grind. Celebrity chef David Park honors the legacy of Hui Ying Chen, bringing her family's authentic Cantonese recipes to San Francisco in a stunning new restaurant experience. Dynasty represents the next evolution of Chinese-American cuisine, preserving tradition while embracing innovation. They'd used a photo of my mother, who'd hated photos, who'd spent her life being invisible, without permission, without context, turning her into a marketing prop. The release quoted Marcus. "My mother would be so proud to see her recipes reaching a wider audience. This partnership with Chef Park ensures her legacy lives forever." I read it 7 times, each time finding new layers of obscenity in those words. The food media went insane. Eater SF ran a glowing preview. The Chronicle's food critic tweeted excitement. Food and Wine did a feature on the new wave of family recipe preservation through restaurant partnerships. And Lunar. Suddenly, we were yesterday's news. The phone stopped ringing for reservations. Our Instagram engagement dropped 40% in 3 days. I watched my restaurant, my Michelin-starred love letter to my mother, get memory hold in real time while the vultures circled the corpse. Aiden found me in the walk-in cooler at 11 p.m., sitting on an overturned milk crate, staring at nothing. "You okay?" he asked, which was generous since the answer was obviously no. "They're winning," I said. My voice sounded hollow even to me. Right now, in this moment, Marcus and David Park are winning. Aiden sat down next to me on a case of bok choy. "You knew this would happen. It's part of the plan. Knowing and experiencing are different things," I said. "Knowing is abstract. This is watching my mother get strip-mined for content." The worst part was social media. Food influencers who'd never met my mother were posting tributes. So beautiful to see immigrant legacies honored this way. Chef Park is doing important work preserving these traditions, and interspersed with the praise, subtle digs at Lunar. Interesting that Victoria Chen kept these recipes to herself for so long. Family drama. Why wouldn't she want her mother's food to reach more people? They were rewriting the narrative in real time, turning my protection of Mom's legacy into gatekeeping, turning Marcus's theft into generosity. I wanted to scream, wanted to post the emails, the evidence, the truth. But Patricia's voice in my head, wait, let them invest everything, let them commit completely, then destroy them when they can't back out. So I waited, and it was agony. This must be what it feels like to watch someone walk toward a cliff while everyone applauds, knowing you're the only one who can see the edge. Dynasty's soft opening was scheduled for 3 weeks from the announcement. I used that time to shore up Lunar's defenses. We launched a tasting menu called Hui Ying's Table. My mother's recipes, the real ones, presented with stories of her immigration, her struggles, her triumphs. I posted about it with careful emotional honesty. My mother's recipes were her love language. Every dish at Lunar tells the story of a woman who came to America with nothing and gave her children everything. This menu honors her the only way I know how, by cooking her food with the respect it deserves. The post went modestly viral. Not Apex-level numbers, but enough. Enough for food media to notice. Enough for the narrative to get complicated. Dueling Chen family restaurants. Victoria Chen breaks silence on Dynasty. The Chronicle called for comment. I declined. Not yet. Let them think I was the bitter, petty sister. Let them build that narrative. It would make the truth even more devastating. Then came Dynasty's preview night, invitation only, press and VIP influencers, the kind of event designed to generate opening night hype. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I had my sources. Aiden knew 3 food writers on the guest list. They owed him favors. And in San Francisco's incestuous food scene, everyone talks. The texts started coming in around 8 p.m. First, from Chronicle's critic, the char siu is burnt and somehow raw inside. Then from the Eater editor, soup dumplings exploded everywhere. Kitchen's a mess. This is weird. Then, critically, from a Michelin inspector who owed Aiden a career-making recommendation. Something is very wrong here. These recipes are either poorly executed or poorly written. Mapo tofu tasted like Novocaine. Dan noodles were inedible. Vinegar bomb. What happened? I felt everything in my chest unclench. It had worked. The fake recipes, scaled to restaurant capacity, had failed exactly as designed. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Within an hour, photos leaked, Instagram stories from influencers, hastily deleted but screenshot, plates of burnt pork, soup spilled everywhere, guests looking confused and disappointed. And then the reviews started dropping. Not even published reviews, just live tweets. Dynasty preview night is a disaster. How did this happen? Tasted nothing like Lunar. Where's the Chen family magic? David Park owes us an explanation. I watched it unfold in real time from my office, and instead of satisfaction, I felt something darker. Vindication. Yes, but also the sickening realization that I'd engineered a public humiliation, and everyone in that room was collateral damage. Guests who'd expected a nice dinner, staff who'd been hired in good faith, even the real recipes of my mother's now associated with failure. Aiden appeared in my doorway. He'd been getting the same updates. "You did this," he said, not a question. I nodded. He looked at me for a long time. "How does it feel?" "Like I'm drowning," I whispered. "But everyone else is drowning too, so at least I'm not alone." I gave it 2 more days. Let Dynasty try to salvage the situation. They announced technical difficulties, delayed the public opening, brought in consultant chefs. David Park released a statement. "We're committed to honoring Huiying Chen's legacy and will take the time necessary to get it right." Marcus and Bryn went silent. No social media posts, no public appearances. I imagined them in panic mode, watching $850,000 evaporate as Apex threatened to invoke the contract's authenticity clause. Then, on Sunday morning, I posted the video, filmed it myself, in Lunar's kitchen, wearing my chef's whites, hair pulled back, no makeup, just me and my mother's real journal, open on the counter. I'd written a script, but ended up abandoning it, speaking from the raw wound that had been bleeding for 6 weeks. 8 months ago, I lost my mother. 6 weeks ago, I discovered my brother photographed every page of her recipe journal without permission and sold the photos to Apex Restaurant Group for $850,000. I let that number hang in the air. Let people do the math about what my mother's 40 years of culinary expertise was worth to her own son. What Marcus stole and what Apex bought wasn't real. I'd discovered the plan before it was complete, so I created a fake journal, identical to my mother's, filled with recipes that looked right but contained subtle flaws that would only emerge at restaurant scale. Dynasty didn't fail because of execution. It failed because they built an empire on stolen lies, and I made sure those lies would destroy them. I held up the real journal. These are my mother's actual recipes. She left them to me because I spent 20 years earning them. Not because I'm special, because I showed up. I was there for the 4 a.m. prep shifts at our family restaurant. I was there through her cancer treatments, writing down last-minute corrections she remembered. I was there. My voice cracked. I let it. Marcus was there for the inheritance negotiation and the funeral buffet. David Park didn't preserve my mother's legacy. He tried to colonize it, to extract value from immigrant labor the way this industry has done for decades. And Marcus... I stopped, took a breath. This was the part that hurt. Marcus chose $850,000 over the one thing Mom asked of him. Take care of your sister. Take care of the family. He read, take care as take from. And now he has to live with that. I held up my phone, showed screenshots of the emails, the contract, the theft documentation. I'm posting all of this, the evidence, the timeline, the legal documents, not because I want sympathy, because I want the truth to matter more than marketing budgets. I looked directly at the camera. Mom, if you're watching from wherever you are, I'm sorry I had to weaponize your recipes to protect them. I'm sorry I became someone who chooses revenge over forgiveness. But I couldn't let them turn you into a commodity. You were worth more than $850,000. You were worth everything. I posted the video at 9 a.m. By noon, it had 2 million views. By 5 p.m., it was national news. Good Morning America wanted an interview. Netflix was calling about documentary rights. But more importantly, the narrative had flipped. David Park's Wikipedia page was being edited in real time to include culinary IP theft. Apex's board issued a statement announcing an OP investigation. Dynasty's landlord terminated their lease, citing reputation damage. And Marcus called me at 11 p.m., drunk, crying, destroyed. You won, Vic? You fucking won. Are you happy? He wasn't yelling. He was sobbing. And Bryn left me, took her stuff and went to her parents' place. The same parents who disowned her. But apparently I'm worse. Apex wants their money back plus damages. We spent $200,000 already. We're going to lose everything. Might face criminal charges. And the baby. His voice broke completely. And my daughter is going to grow up knowing her dad is a thief who betrayed his family. I should have felt triumphant. I'd architected this exact outcome. Instead, I felt hollow. Why'd you do it, Marcus? I asked. Not accusatory. Genuinely asking. You could have just asked me for money. I've given you money 100 times. He laughed bitterly. That's exactly why. Because you always gave, and I always took. And somewhere along the way, I started resenting you for it. You were perfect Victoria, the chef, the Michelin star, Mom's legacy in human form. And I was the fuck-up little brother who couldn't even cook ramen. The money wasn't the point. The point was proving I could build something without you, that I wasn't just your charity case. He paused. Turns out I was right. I can't build anything without you. I can only destroy things. Congratulations on being right about me. The line went dead. I sat there in my empty apartment. Marcus and Bryn had moved out days ago, ghost style, leaving only the furniture I'd bought, and felt the weight of what I'd done settle like concrete in my chest. The next morning, I got an email from Bryn. Subject line, I'm sorry, and I hate you. The body was one paragraph. You were right to destroy us. We deserved it. But you need to know that when I found out I was pregnant, I panicked. My parents cut me off. Marcus was drowning in debt. I thought we could take just a piece of what you had. You have so much, Victoria, and we had nothing, and you'd never even notice. I was wrong. But here's what you need to understand. You won, And now you get to be alone with your victory and your restaurant and your dead mother's recipes. I hope it's enough, because you chose it over your last living family. When our daughter asks why she doesn't have an aunt, I'll tell her the truth. Aunt Victoria loved a book of recipes more than she loved us. And I guess that makes both of us monsters in different ways. I read it 5 times. Couldn't decide if she was right. 6 months later, here's what happened. Dynasty closed permanently. David Park resigned from Apex amid shareholder lawsuits. Marcus and Bryn declared bankruptcy and moved to Oregon. He's working at a food truck, ironically cooking the recipes he tried to steal, now properly learned through desperation and YouTube videos. Bryn had the baby, a girl, named May, my mother's name. They sent a photo. I haven't responded. Don't know what to say to a niece who exists in the blast radius of my revenge. Lunar thrives. We got a 2nd Michelin star. I published a memoir, The Last Recipe, that hit the New York Times bestseller list. I donate 30% of proceeds to an organization supporting immigrant families. I'm doing everything right. I'm successful beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm so fucking lonely. I sometimes forget what my own voice sounds like outside of yes, chef, and no. Table 3 is allergic to shellfish. Aiden left 3 months ago, took a head chef position in Portland. We don't talk. Before he left, he said, "You were right about the revenge. They deserved consequences. But you were wrong about the cost. You thought you'd pay in family, but you paid in yourself. The Victoria I met 8 years ago wouldn't recognize you now." He was right. I'm sharper now, harder, more successful, more alone. I cook my mother's recipes every day, and they taste like ashes. Not because they're wrong, because they're right, and I'm the one who's corroded. Last night, I cooked her Hong Shao Roo, the red braised pork, the recipe that started this whole catastrophe. It was perfect, meltingly tender, complex, exactly as she'd taught me. I plated it, sat alone at my counter, took 1 bite, and couldn't finish it, because every recipe now tastes like the family I destroyed to protect them. Maybe Bryn was right. Maybe I loved a book of recipes more than I loved people. Or maybe I loved the recipes because they were the only thing people couldn't steal without consequences. Either way, I'm 40 years old, at the peak of my career, surrounded by Michelin stars and cookbook deals and press that calls me the guardian of immigrant culinary legacy. And I've never been more aware that you can win every battle and still lose the war. Mom used to say, "Victoria, success means nothing if you have no one to share it with." I'm beginning to understand she wasn't being sentimental. She was warning me. Too late now. The recipes are safe. The restaurant is thriving. My family is gone. And I'm still here, cooking in the wreckage, wondering if there's a recipe for undoing the irreversible. There isn't. Some things, once cooked, can't be made raw again. I chose this, and now I have to eat it. Before I go, I need to know which side you're on. Team Victoria or Team Marcus? Leave a comment. This community has the smartest and most thoughtful people. If you're new here, sign up now. We share stories like this every week. Real human dramas, tough choices, and revenge that makes you question everything. Your next story is already waiting on the screen. Click now. See you there in a second. Thanks for watching.